welcome, brothers, to another episode of Around the Fire. This is episode number 5 on time mastery. I am here, as always, with Eric Alman. Pleasure to be here with you, brother.
Too, man.
All right, I'm going to start this off with a statement that I've said probably thousands of times in my life, and perhaps you have too, dear listener. I don't have time. 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 Keep saying it, right? And you could probably reflect in all the times within your personal timeline that has been stated. And what a disempowering statement, right? What a statement laced with victimhood, with pressure, with urgency, with stress. And I say that without judgment because, as I open with, that has been part of my dialogue. It has been stated to friends, to family, to lovers, to myself, to teachers, to pets even, right? I don't have time to walk you right now, dog, right? Like, it has been probably the one victim statement that has taken the longest to shed, right? And to find an element of choice and empowerment within it. And it makes sense. We are in this culture that seemingly has less time than it ever has, right? With more distractions than we've ever had, with more sense of an expectation imposed on our responsiveness to every ping, prong, and prod around us. And I say prod because most of us, are cattle marching along, right, to that humdrum beat created for us rather than our own, rather than self-empowering and taking control. And I appreciate and acknowledge how difficult that is. And that is why I'm so stoked to open this conversation and be more in a student role in this one as we lean into Eric's mastery over time, his very necessary mastery over it, given the amount of responsibility and duty he has bravely taken on in his own life. And we'll hear all about that. And I am ready to confront my own shadows around time alongside you. And let's hit it, Eric. Let's open this container.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, men, for joining us for this potent podcast today. So to begin, let's find a place of stillness around us and within us. And you can close your eyes. And first, just bring your awareness to your breath, drawing your breath in through the nose, down into the belly, so that your belly expands on the inhale. And on the exhale, it moves back toward your spine. And with each upcoming inhale, just bring your awareness along with the inhale down into your body. Becoming aware of any tension you may be holding, anywhere you are not feeling free and relaxed, any stress, any excess mental energy that may be going on for you right now. And with each exhale, just allow yourself to relax, letting go of some of the tension, some of the stress, some of the mental energy. And just using your breath to release all that isn't serving you in this moment. And as you do, I invite all of us into the sacred space around the fire. And as we create this sacred space, we ask for assistance in surrounding the sacred space with energetic protection, keeping out anything and everything not in alignment with the highest and the best good of both Ryan, myself, and all the listeners. We ask that all of our electronic devices, communication devices, all frequencies used to communicate between ourselves and to store this recording all be encrypted and cleared and purified and kept sanctified so that we can enjoy a sovereign and protected and pure conversation here without any exterior tampering. And now, with that protection in place, we take a moment to honor all of the ancestors who have walked this path before us, all of the descendants who will continue walking this path after us, all of the masters, teachers, guides, wisdom keepers, lineage holders, and all those who support the highest and best good of all of us as men walking on this path. We bow deeply to you. We honor you. We honor the directions of the north, south, east, west, Father Sky above, Mother Earth below. We honor the divine spark within and without. And now, as you breathe down into your body, I invite you to breathe a bit deeper, anchoring into your spot around the fire with us for the next 45 minutes, however long this conversation takes. And I invite you to relax into the truth that comes up for you. You know, as men, many of us have developed the ability to bury inconvenient truths in the name of comfort. And as we've created the space and the safety for this conversation, around the fire is the perfect place to shed light on those truths. So I invite you to allow that natural process to happen. And with another deep breath into your belly, we open the space. When you feel grounded and centered, you can open your eyes.
All right. So, where to begin a conversation about time? I found it so curious that when I was in my early 20s, single, without children, my battle cry was, I don't have time, right? Without almost any responsibility other than my own pursuits and ambitions, I still felt like I didn't have time. And of course, that got even more true through relationship, right? And then through fatherhood. So there's been a dysfunctional relationship with time, regardless of how much responsibility has been on my plate. And I'd love your insight, Eric, as to what you perceive to be the root of a dysfunctional relationship between men and the idea of time.
Well, I think we can start out with acknowledging that for men who primarily identify in their masculine energy, so they're most confident and comfortable in their masculine energy, the deepest desire is to have no burden, to have nothing to do. And at the surface, that looks like doing a lot often. And you might think, well, that's pretty counterintuitive. You know, why would we choose to do a lot? Well, we build this muscle of doing a lot, but at the root of that is trying to get everything done. So we enjoy the checklist because we believe the fallacy that everything one day will be done.
Yeah.
And that is
rings true.
that is at the core of why we try to get everything done.
Man, I've been chasing that climatic endpoint for 20 years.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's all so that we feel like there is this endpoint where there is nothing to do. The burden is gone, and we could simply be the freedom that we are. Right.
And most men are terrified of that, by the way. Like most men are like, fuck, I don't want to be in that burdenless, because what might happen in that space? Even it's like it's a paradox of like, I deeply desire that, and oh shit, my body and my mind aren't used to being in that, you know? And so we habitually pile it on to the max, sometimes beyond the max. And we keep ourselves in this, I don't have time space, some of us.
Yeah. So that's certainly one core aspect of it. A very shadowy aspect of it that I've experienced is a resentment towards the people or projects or things who would dare claim my time, right? And I mean, I had this experience, right, with my online booking calendar, right? Whenever anyone would dare book something that I invited them to book, and it would just appear on my Google Calendar, I'd have that fuck you energy to it, right? Like, who are you to just claim my time, right? And essentially experiencing it as such a scarce resource, right? And feeling violated when it's claimed. And certainly it is such a valuable asset to be tremendously mindful of. And the amount of stress and neuroticism that comes with having a scarcity mindset around time can also be equally damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an easy one to feel. Like in this moment, think about somebody coming to you and asking you to do 4 hours worth of work for them on top of your other work today.
Right.
Now think about yourself saying to them, I don't have time to do this. Just build into that is that, like, how dare you?
Right.
You know, like for me, that's how I experience that when I say I don't have time to do that. Especially when compared to, that's not something I'm going to spend time on today.
Right.
I'm choosing to do these things, or I'm not spending my bandwidth on that right now.
Right. Which is a conscious choice and a clear decision and a clear boundary. And I feel that, and I'm speaking personally here, that is a healthy way to manage the resource of time, free of the resentment or even the feeling of anger and betrayal towards one who would dare claim it, right? I feel like if one can own that boundary of, I am choosing not to express my time and energy in this today, right? If you can say that without the guilt, right? I think a lot of the anger we feel towards those who would claim it is we feel they're putting us in a position where we have to feel guilty for the refusal.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe the root of it.
It's like that. I don't want to enforce my boundary. Why are you making me have a boundary here?
There you go. Yeah.
I've experienced this. I mean, this was early days in my business and relationship with my wife. Hardcore. Yeah. Like, she's wanting to spend more time with me and I'm getting upset by that. And like, there would be times where I would step back and see, like, why the fuck am I getting upset that my wife loves me and actually wants to spend time with me? And that's pissing me off. And that was because there was so much wrapped up in that. Like, and a lot of men might be able to relate to, like, don't you see what I'm trying to do for the family? Or don't you see how hard I'm working for the family? I'm not even spending any time on myself.
Right.
You know, like, I'm already on empty. How could you ask for more? There's so much there. I mean, we were talking before, this can be a very unsexy topic to work on. And I would attribute, personally and in my relationship, this has impacted more than anything else, more than the deepest shadow work, which of course this can provoke, this work.
Yeah. There's something so rich here that I'm leaning into myself, right? Of developing the capacity and the courage to set that boundary compassionately yet directly, and be okay with, and this is the potentially more difficult part, understand that it's likely going to hit resistance from the other party, right? And they will feel resentful towards you. They will feel hurt by you. They will feel like your boundary is unjustified. And that makes it even more difficult to hold in self-respect, right? And I think that is where it gets really tricky, is just because you have developed the courage and capacity to set a healthy boundary doesn't entitle you to a healthy response from those you're setting it from.
No. And like, let's look at this in the context of a family, right? Like the family man, you and I both have kids. We both have wives, so any man out there, this is kind of, in my eyes, it's like when we step into new levels of initiation, you have a partner. Okay, that's somebody who's going to reflect stuff back to you. That's one initiation. Then you have children. There's a whole other level of like sacred mirrors surrounding you, who are going to want more of your time. It's another cup that, if you had children responsibly, or you're stepping into responsible fatherhood, which if you're watching this, you most likely are, it's another cup you're going to want to fill. In that situation, if you are taking any kind of leadership role in the family, if you're holding the structure is about being able to zoom out and see the bigger picture, and time mastery. I mean, I've grown to a point where I'm like, "Ooh, this is sexy now because I can see it from the top." But like in the moment, you may hear that response from your partner or from your kids who, I mean, this is when it gets really hard. It's like, "Papa, come down and look at this thing, come down and play with us, or your wife comes into your office and is giving you that eye, like, come on, we can go right now, like over in the other room. Like, this is where it's challenging to really hold the pose or hold the structure. Right. But you're zooming out and you're seeing, if I do this right now, here's the impact 10 steps down the line. Right. And you may not like this, but you're gonna love when I show up full tilt for date night later tonight,
Yeah, otherwise it's death by a million compromises, right? Or resentment by a million compromises. And I feel like this is where the books fall a little bit short, right? So in Way of the Superior Man, very popular book in this space, right? Yeah. I remember Data talks about a similar situation, right? Your wife wants to be with you and you say, I appreciate that. I require, another hour to focus on this work, and then you're going to have my full presence, right? I'm paraphrasing horribly right now. He said it in the beautiful languaging he often does, right? And the response to that is very rarely going to be, thank you. I understand. I look forward to our time together, right?
Yeah.
That scene continues, right? And it can often continue in, a response that is triggered by their own wounds of rejection, of abandonment, of he doesn't care about me, right? Projections will come up, right? It is, even if it is said compassionately and directly, it's going to be received in ways that are less than ideal most of the time with most people, right? And ultimately, I think that is a topic of communication with your partner and those you set boundaries with, right? That when I say this, I'm aware that it may trigger X, Y, and Z in you. I want to be abundantly clear that I love you. And when I set this boundary, it is for the absolute integrity of the time we share together and ensuring that I'm fully present and you get the best of me, right? So the communication aspect around the boundary setting and how you set it is something that if you have yet to practice this, maybe a part of it, right? Otherwise it can be jarring of like, holy shit, he just like kicked me out of the room, right? That's how it might be felt or absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that is an easier conversation to have with adults than children. It's not a conversation to have with children who don't yet have the capacity to even understand what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's necessary for the sustainability of you feeling a degree of mastery over your time, which is a degree of mastery over your energy, which is a degree of mastery over your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to acknowledge, or we get to acknowledge here, if we choose to, that a lot of this, especially when we look at it through the lens of like with our partner,
Mm-hmm.
is there's always this degree of the masculine wanting things to be easy, wanting the conversation to be easy,
Mm-hmm.
wanting them to get it, you know, wanting that something to change
Mm-hmm.
and become simpler and more peaceful and more calm. The more you do the scheduling work, the time mastery work, the more present you're going to be. The more
Mm-hmm.
present you're going to be, the more turned on your partner is going to be, the more they're going to want to spend time with you, which means the more it's going to affect their heart when you continue to say you can't spend time with them, which is going to also continue to make you more present when you are with them. And this cycle, no matter how good you get at doing this, let's just acknowledge right off the bat that the more valuable, present, and powerful you become with mastering time and orchestrating your life and creating it in a way that's very powerful,
Mm-hmm.
the more your partner is going to want to spend time with you.
Right.
So this won't probably ever get to a point where they're not going to ask for your time.
Mm-hmm.
And what will change way more than even great communication, which is 100% necessary, especially in the early days of this work. But what really will make the impact there is when they see the results.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start setting all these boundaries, but nothing changes, and when you're with them, you're on your phone and you're also taking work emails and all this stuff, they're going to rightfully call you out for being full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because
Rightfully.
Exactly. Like 100%. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to mirror back to you where you're out of integrity with what you say you're being about.
Mm-hmm. Right. You know, if I scheduled in time to go to the gym, right, and I get caught in a Facebook or Instagram vortex, yeah, call me out, right? You know, because now I have betrayed the agreements and expectations that I have worked to solidify, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have betrayed my own boundaries and in turn have diminished the level of trust, right? Now it feels like I'll make an exception elsewhere, but hold that boundary for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that starts getting into trespass territory, right? And rightfully so. So I want to get into the practical nitty gritty, right? Of how
Sure.
you personally block time, schedule time, maintain those boundaries, and don't get too, shall we say, rigid, right? Knowing that
Mm-hmm.
life has variables beyond our control, and the more humans in your ecosystem, and you have quite a few, the more potential for, you know, things not going according to script. And how you maintain structured flexibility within that so that you don't feel this negative spiral every time your best laid plans have to be reshuffled, which I'm sure happens fairly often, you know? So yeah, I'd love to just get, you know, a day in the life of Eric, right? Or a week, or how you really kind of have attained a degree of mastery over time.
Sure. Weeks are what I'm really like see as the sweet spot for scheduling. And, you know, I have 4 kids, you know, for listeners who don't know, and an amazing wife, and I'm the sole provider in our family. We homeschool our kids, I say we, my wife primarily does the homeschooling, and she also runs a homeschool enrichment group, which means she is very in her masculine, often watching kids, running essentially a business. And I'm also, running businesses as well. And what that means is that both of us need certain things, and my kids need certain things. So there are real needs, and then there are desires within my family. And the way I like to look at time is from a zoomed out perspective. So like 100 feet looking down. Okay. And so everybody has their needs in my family. Let's make sure the needs get met. And we can do that with a structure, with a schedule. Time blocking is how I really recommend everybody do it, because that gives a structure to work within that you can measure against. The real value that I've found after doing this for a few years is when you do time blocking, you can approach it scientifically. And if you combine time blocking with something like a relationship meeting that you can have scheduled in, you can start to check in with like, how are you feeling? Like I notice I really love how you're showing up in all these places. I would love some more of this. And your partner can share that too. And you can start to optimize as if, not to overly masculinize this process, which is a very masculine process to begin with. But you can start to make optimizations, focusing on the weakest points first. So if you're noticing, which things that I pay attention to are tantrums from my kids, what are the types of tantrums that are happening? Because often tantrums are an invitation for more attention. A child doesn't know how to communicate. I would love some more of this. They often will communicate through acting out or fighting. So looking at what types of tantrums are happening, and my wife is on the front lines there, so that's something we talk about. But also the state of my wife, like if you're in a relationship and you've been in a relationship for a while, you can read the temperature level of your partner. You can see how things are going. And, we talked about in the Sacred Men's Council just a couple nights ago, Ryan, I've been doing this a long time, and there's still constantly things are evolving and need to be upgraded within your schedule. So there was a certain thing going on where a certain flow of the schedule wasn't working well for my wife, and she wasn't getting what she needed. And so there are little tweaks that I can do to just totally fix that. One example is if I'm working late Monday and Tuesday, I can go over, if I'm working till midnight, which sounds crazy, right? It may sound crazy to people who are working a more traditional schedule, but you don't have to work a traditional schedule unless if you're working for somebody else, maybe you do. And you can get creative even in that context of where you do your work, where you do your workouts, your personal time, all those things. But on some of the days, I don't even start work like today until noon. So if I'm working till midnight, I may go over and massage my wife's feet for 15 minutes at 10 o'clock before she goes to bed. Maybe we spend some extra time having breakfast, and it doesn't take a lot of time to fill cups. It's the consciousness of, here are the cups that need to be filled. And in my case, that's work, personal time, wife time, kid time. And there's different flavors of all of those, but that's a big overview.
Yeah, that's awesome. It brings back to mind something you alluded to earlier in this conversation, right? Which is men and people in general. I won't just say only men, but there is a natural inclination and even entitlement to things being easy, right? to doing this work once and having that harmonious endpoint, right? Where everything is going to flow, nothing will ever have to be figured out again. And how dare something this be disruptive again, right? And that's an infantile expectation that has taken me a lot of introspection and work to release, right? And instead relish in the capacity and the ongoing duty to respond, to adapt, and to reestablish a new pattern, right? Or reestablish a new optimization or tweak or hypothesis even, right? But that's taken a lot of work, right? To let go of the expectation that things will be easy. So I want to acknowledge that part of the conversation and your honesty and transparency that even with mastery, disruption can happen, needs can still be unmet. And that is part of this ever evolving complex ecosystem that is a family, right? Needs shift, right? And as needs are not being met, right? That isn't a signal of failure. That isn't a reason to believe that we have fucked this whole thing up, right? And let's just toss it all aside and be in this flow, and whatever happens, happens, which is also a natural impulse. But to say, all right, that's expected, right? We are 6 humans in this household with varying, ever evolving, and shifting needs. It is my responsibility and an aspect of my mastery to be able to oversee that, acknowledge that, and make necessary corrections. And as those corrections become necessary, I see that not as an additional strain or burden or failure, but precisely what my duty as the overseer of this system is.
Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think what's beautiful about tracking your time in this way, because you're not actually like keeping track of the time you spend doing something, because you create the schedule. Here's the time I have for this cup. Here's the time I have for this cup. It's time to switch. It's an opportunity, one, to build a large amount of trust with your partner when you say, I'm going to be downstairs from work at 3 p.m. when you are down on the minute. That you respect that time, right? It's a way you can create for yourself to either show up or not show up. And I'll give you an example of something that came up recently. So we have this homeschool enrichment group, and my wife's running it. There's many families here with their children, and a stomach bug was going through my house. Well, 2 weeks in a row, the 2 days that the homeschool enrichment group was running, my daughter, 1 week it was one daughter, the next week it was the other daughter, they were sick. So that means that the time when I would normally be working, I was going to watch my child, I was going to take care of them because my wife wasn't going to be able to be there for that. Now, old Eric, before time blocking, before being more conscious of time, which is really what we're talking about, would have went into scarcity mode of like, oh my God, how could I do this? Like, and the classic line I would have used is, if I was going away working at a job, would I be taking off work for this?
Yep.
I would go into victim, even though it's consciously not the life I chose. I would use that excuse.
I've been there.
Yeah, man.
Word for word.
Yeah, that's a classic, right? For the entrepreneur. And the way forward in those moments is, okay, because I hold consciously the schedule, I am the keeper of time and structure. I know what needs to get done. I know what can be put off until the next day or the next week. And I know how to make all of this work because I've been holding it.
Yeah.
And if you tell me that here's something going, this bomb just dropped right here, I can rearrange everything to meet the situation, to meet my family, to hold them through the situation.
Yeah.
Which only builds that much more trust.
Yeah. It builds trust and it builds capacity. And in my experience, that victim voice gets so fucking loud in those moments when the bomb drops, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you my examples that might relate to, the lives of the men listening to this. You know, my son, like we didn't have any childcare, during the first few years, right? Not a whole lot of help from parents, no daycare. We hired a few kind of nannies, within our household, and they lasted maybe 2 weeks at a time, then disappeared. And every time they would disappear or stop coming in or quit, that was like the bomb dropped. And it's like, oh shit, okay. Now as of noon, I am in, what my victim would call dad mode, right? For the afternoon. And I have to end my workday by noon, and I'm like, how am I supposed to perform and provide working 20 hours a week when, other entrepreneurs get 60 or 70, right?
Totally.
And the comparison, you're like, how am I supposed to measure up and grow the business, on this, right? And don't you understand what this is going to mean for us, right? Mm-hmm. And that is just spiraling so fast that it's almost giving you very limited perspective and resource to rise to that. And I recall, this is kind of where I hit rock bottom on this was, I would be carrying my son, when he was maybe 1.5 or 2, I would be carrying him to the park near our house, and we'd get to the park and the park would only be, nannies and stay-at-home moms. And I felt so angry that, there were no other working men or entrepreneurs here. I was the only one who had to take off time from building the business or being at work to do this. And I felt that exact same thing. I'm like, what would happen if I didn't have the flexibility to do this, right? If I was at, a corporate job, or what if I had to travel for work? What then, right? Is the flexibility in my schedule enabling dysfunction in our family? That was something that kept spinning. And I remember having breakfast with one of my early mentors in the copywriting space, actually. He was the first person who saw my potential in that space and ended up becoming a friend and a mentor and a guide through fatherhood because he was a few years deeper into that journey. And I remember confessing all this to him one morning, just in total victimhood over that situation. And he was like, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing terribly again, but he's essentially like, dude, what a blessing that you can do that, right? He's like, is your business doing okay? I'm like, yes. He's like, is your family safe and healthy and well? I'm like, yes. He's like, are you healthy and well? I'm like, yes. And then he's like, well, you're fucking doing it, shut up and just keep going, right? Like, what a blessing that you are able to build a life and build up the capacity where you can tend to all those things, right? When things do get disruptive. So that's where my own rigidity got called to question, right? And all the false ideas and narratives that I knew weren't true, but would rise to the surface as rebuttals. And those stung, those were agonizing. Even if I could pierce through the bullshit myself somatically, it triggered something that was so intrusive on my perceived ideals that was an initiation. I was in this place of stuckness where, holy shit, I can't continue this way. And these ideas are just pressing up against me so strong right now with so much pressure. And that required a lot of work and a lot of insight. And hopefully in just kind of recounting that story and noticing some of those patterns in your own life, you could begin to create a bit of space and liberation from them.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And it is a blessing. It is a blessing that our family wants our time. It is a blessing that we're here to offer that we've created a life where we're available to that. And, one of the things I think that I had a tendency to go into was like looking for the black or white answer. And it's very easy with this time blocking to be like, okay, I should be really rigid. Here's the time blocking. Or, okay, he just said I should be flexible. So now I'm just going to be flexible. And anytime my family wants my time, I'm going to be flexible, right? There is no black and white here. There will be times when your children, when your partner, when the world wants your time, and the optimum path forward where you consider your schedule, you consider your everything you're holding, and you decide, no, it's not optimum for me to do this thing, and you'll have to set a boundary. And there are other times where it will serve you to be flexible. Mm-hmm. And you will only know which is the right path when you decide to own it, when you decide to hold the schedule, when you decide, and that doesn't mean either that you're dictating this to your partner. This can very much be a co-creation, which we'll get to, I think, toward the end of this conversation, in the way I've had success having that conversation. And you'll create your own beautiful, artful way of doing that. And you get to become a master at this, not by avoiding it, not by being a victim to it, by saying, okay, I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it work. And then I'm going to get really fucking good at it. And I want to paint a picture, because I imagine there's some men right now that sounds like, fuck, just one more burden, one more thing I have to hold. Like, I don't have time, right? I get that. And picture you're starting to do this time blocking, right? You have, not only do you have a date night every week, some of you may already have that. And by the way, it doesn't mean you need to go out on a date every week. You don't need to have a date night every week. Maybe you have one, whatever works for you. You know what's right for your family, especially after you start being conscious of the time. But not only do you have the time scheduled to fill the cups, you start to notice, oh, the way this flows into this creates this type of outcome. Mm-hmm. So if I rearrange things, for example, let's say you have date night and you were doing budgeting right before that, and budgeting, your partner is a part of budgeting in your family, and you notice that after budgeting, your partner's very energetically closed off because she's very in her head from doing all the numbers and talking about the goals, and it's very a masculine process. And so you're noticing that it takes like 2 hours into date night for your partner to loosen up. And you look at the schedule and you say, oh, if I just move this over here and I give my partner her long break time before date night, which she's always like radiant after, date night is going to be fire now from now on.
Right.
You start to create this masterful way of optimizing and creating within your family that has humongous implications, humongous results in the family.
I love that. It's kind of like a composer, right? Like knowing
Absolutely.
what to piece when, right? To create the most kind of beautiful and outcome symphony, right? Of all those notes being played. And of course, that is a result of just a sensitivity and an openness and an awareness of, as you said, when we do this, what is the energetic signature generated there, right? And then rearrange the pieces. And I love that. I love what you were sharing about, like, just the simplicity, right? Of finding that crack in time to offer your partner a massage, right? And how so much energy can be generated through these little micro moments and micro gestures that in our rigidity, we often don't even believe are available to us. Time is one thing. And of course, energy management is another conversation. And maybe we kind of pair this episode with an energy management episode. But, at the end of the day, right? Like, if you took 15 minutes and had an interaction that filled you with greater energy and capacity and love, that's a very solid investment of time, right? Whereas, of course, there are things we may do with our time that are depleting and exhausting and generate energetic states within us that are non-conducive to doing anything after, right? And we could go through the whole laundry list of that, whether that's, social media binge fests, certain addictions, addictive behaviors, or even just simmering in angst and bitterness and refusal, like folded arm refusal, right?
Yeah.
The amount of spells we cast against ourselves just with our languaging around that of I can't and I don't have time and I won't and I'm under pressure and I don't have enough space and all these things that I myself have been prone to saying are so not, even if they feel a little bit true in that moment, are so non-conducive towards creating those breakthroughs and that mastery and that level of empowerment that is required to get to that next level. So I love this conversation. I'd love for you to bring it home with just some very clear guidelines of what can be done and performed to establish greater clarity on how time is utilized and ways to uphold it and to optimize it as things move on.
Yeah, I think a great way to start, a really clear way to start, is to set aside half an hour to do this practice and spend the first 10 minutes of it just really getting still and thinking about what's important to you in your life. What are your priorities, really? What is important? What are things that are non-negotiables and what are nice to haves? And then writing them down. What are the cups, I would call them, that you want to be filling up every week? And just take a week, a chunk of a week, or a week as a chunk of time. What are cups that need to get filled each week? And either do it on a piece of paper or in a spreadsheet and color code it so that you can see on the page at a quick glance where all the colors are. Is work blocking out 90% of the time, even though in terms of what's important to you, it's not 90% of your priority? And you'll quickly be able to see, and you may not be able to shift things immediately, but this is where having support comes in, of somebody to challenge your bullshit, to be honest. But as a practice to get started, identify what those cups are and lay out a week and write down currently what it looks like. So what's your current schedule? So you can get really clear on where you're spending your time. And if you're unhappy with the way you're spending your time, create an optimized version of that, a version 1. Because the one you're on now, we're going to call beta. So
Right.
Create a version 1 of your schedule and start working toward that.
I love that. And there are aspects to this conversation that we'll keep for a future episode, right? The topic of productivity is very closely tied, right? And I feel that when time is blocked, when you have a window, right, you're almost pulled into a productive state, right? Where you have a very specific outcome that you're choosing to generate within that window. And that 90-minute block, right? If it goes longer than that, you are infringing on another commitment, right? To your partner, to your child, or to yourself, right? And I think that draws on and calls on a deeper reservoir of resource than we would have allowed ourselves to have access to otherwise. So the energetics of productivity, I think, would be a really cool conversation to have. And maybe we'll bookmark that for future use. And certainly if that's something that you're interested in, let us know in the comments of this or send us a private message and we'll certainly prioritize it. There we go, prioritize. But yeah, I appreciate this just as a starting point, right? I think the first step in reclamation is simply reclaiming, right? Reclaiming, being the engineer of that time, right? The one who has perspective over it versus the one constantly in it fighting against all the factors that are supposedly infringing. And there's a dance to it. It is a symphony. It is a blend of the masculine and the feminine. There are degrees of chaos within it, and you are called on to establish as much structure within that chaos as you have the capacity to do without feeling victimized by that chaos and that flow and life getting lifey. So that's the invitation, Eric. I super appreciate you sharing your gift and your genius and your experience on this. There have been so few people I have trusted to speak to time mastery, right? So often it is someone whose kids are all grown up, right? Or it is the single dude who is a biohacker in Bali, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, nothing against the single biohacker dude in Bali, right?
Sure.
He certainly has his gifts to share, but contextually, a whole other ball game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I appreciate about you, right? A family with 4 children, running a business, homeschooling on top of it. I think it is exemplary, right? And certainly one that I would feel called to take inspiration from, and of course, the remedial advice from. So I do appreciate you sharing that. And to those listening, I appreciate you choosing to invest that time with us. I hope that it is inspiring and beneficial for you and encouraging you to take those next few steps in having a more empowering relationship to time. And at the very least, being conscious of where you are still feeling victimized by time, watching your language, being mindful of the words you are choosing, being mindful of the boundaries you wish to set, yet haven't yet had the capacity or the courage to set out of fear of how others would respond. And simply being aware of that and making those micro steps gradually, you'll begin to kind of reclaim a sense of power, a sense of power in your relationship with time, other than being dragged along, victimized, helpless, and all these states that don't serve us, they don't serve our families, they don't serve anyone. So with that, I feel complete. How are you feeling, Eric?
I feel good, and I'm aware that I had mentioned earlier in the conversation sharing how to collaborate with your partner in this. And I think what would be the best course of action here is reach out via DM, after you watch this. And because it's an individualized approach, depending on what your life looks like, what your relationship looks like. And within a few quick back and forth questions, I can give you a really solid approach. But that is such a critical point, to have your partner's buy-in on this process, that I would love to support men around that. So any man who watches this and wants to tackle this and do this work, which I recommend everybody do, reach out and we'll be happy to help you come up with a plan of how to best approach this work collaboratively with your partner.
Beautiful. I appreciate that offering. Cool. Ready to close us down?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Let's do it.
So coming back to the breath, men, I invite you now to breathe down into your belly, filling the belly, and then filling the solar plexus, and then filling the chest, and really getting a full breath in. And as you release that through the nose, just really letting all the air flow out. And as you breathe in this powerful way, allowing yourself to be fully present in your body and aware of what's landing for you, what you're taking away from this conversation, and also what you're releasing from your paradigm, what you're not willing to take with you any longer. And we ask that all that just be gracefully swept out through the appropriate channels so that you can fully integrate what is right and perfect for you. And as you breathe back into your body, becoming grounded and centered in your body as you integrate all that is right and perfect for you, we take a moment to dedicate this conversation to the upliftment of suffering and confusion for all sentient beings and the amplification of love energy on this planet and beyond. And with that, we seal it all up, sealing, 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 guarding, 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 protecting, protecting, protecting. It is sealed, it is finished, it is done, so it is, and so be it. And as you breathe back into your body, you find your center, you feel grounded, you can open your eyes, and we are complete.